Tokyo, September 1971. The National Sumo Hall on a championship night carries a specific kind of weight in the air that you notice before you can describe it. Not the weight of tension exactly, more the weight of tradition, the accumulated pressure of a discipline that has existed for centuries in this country and that the people filling these seats tonight take seriously in the way that Japanese martial arts communities take things seriously, which is quietly and completely. 8,000 people, every seat full. The energy, not the loud electric energy of a boxing crowd, but something denser and more focused. The energy of people who have come to witness something they understand deeply. Bruce Lee is in the front row. He is here because the Japan Sumo Federation invited him as an honored guest for the Women's Sumo Championship, and because Enter the Dragon is in development, and his Japanese contacts wanted him to experience traditional Japanese martial culture more broadly. He has been sitting in this seat since the card started, watching with the same quality of attention he brings to everything physical and serious, building a picture from what he observes, finding the principles underneath the techniques. The woman who won tonight's championship deserved to win it. That needs to be said clearly before anything else, because the story that follows is not about her record or her capability, both of which were genuinely extraordinary. Her name is Yamada Keiko. She is 30 years old, born in Fukuoka, training in sumo since she was 16. 14 years of practice that has produced something the Japanese sumo community regards with the specific reverence reserved for practitioners who stopped being competitive long ago and became something more like inevitable. Her record is 64 wins, 0 losses. She has never lost, at any level, against any opponent, in any competition she has entered. She is 6'1", 750 pounds, not heavy in the way that implies slowness or poor conditioning, heavy in the way that mountains are heavy, the way that things built from the ground up, over a long time, and through serious work, develop a kind of mass that is different from accumulated weight. She moves with the coordination of someone who has spent 14 years learning to use what she has, with precision, rather than simply having it. Her throw is what the sumo community talks about most, not the power behind it, though the power is real, the timing. The ability to find the exact moment when an opponent's base is vulnerable and to commit fully at that moment with everything she has. 64 opponents have experienced this. 64 times the mat has received someone who did not want to be there. Tonight's final lasted 90 seconds, which the crowd treated as an achievement for the opponent rather than a comment on Yamada. The opponent was the second-best women's sumo competitor in Japan, and she made Yamada work genuinely in the first 30 seconds, which nobody had done in 3 years of competition. Yamada won the final with a throw that the front rows felt in their seats. The federation chairman took the microphone after the decision and said things in Japanese about the evening and what it represented. Then he said something in Japanese, and then in English, looking toward the front row, that the crowd responded to immediately. He said Bruce Lee's name. The reaction from 8,000 people was genuine. The wave of recognition moving through the building as the name traveled, building as it went. 8,000 people producing the sound of people who have been given something they didn't expect. Bruce stood from the front row, received the championship trophy from the federation chairman, and walked toward the competition area where Yamada was standing with her coaches. He stopped at the appropriate distance and brought his hands together in front of his chest and bowed. The formal bow, complete and unhurried. Yamada looked at him. She did not bow back. She stood with her arms at her sides, 750 pounds of undefeated champion, and looked at Bruce Lee, 5'7" and 140 pounds, with an expression that contained several things, none of them the warm acknowledgement that the moment called for. The federation chairman, standing nearby, shifted slightly. He could read the room. This room had changed. Then he made what seemed like a small, harmless attempt to lighten the atmosphere. He looked at both of them and smiled and said, into the microphone, something that he intended as a playful comment for the crowd, the kind of thing that gets a laugh and moves things along. He said, in Japanese and then in English, perhaps we should ask, would Bruce Lee's kung fu be any match for our champion? Who wins, size or speed? He was not asking seriously. He was doing what MCs do, generating warmth, creating a moment of connection. He expected laughter and a diplomatic deflection, and then the trophy presentation and the photographs and the evening concluding properly. Yamada answered before Bruce could. She said, in Japanese, that the translator near the front row immediately converted, and then she said it again, in her careful English, size always wins. She said it looking directly at Bruce, not at the crowd, not at the chairman, at Bruce. She said, size is physics. Physics doesn't negotiate. A small person trying to move a large person is fighting the laws of the universe. The laws of the universe do not lose. The 8,000 people in the sumo hall registered this and went slightly quieter than they had been. Bruce looked at her. The trophy was still in his hands, and he was looking at her with the quality of attention he gave everything, complete and without any of the reactive heat that most people would have been managing right now. He said, "I'm not sure that's true. Subscribe right now. Because what Yamada says next is what turns this championship ceremony into something nobody in this building will forget." Yamada looked at him. The expression on her face shifted from the settled certainty of the opening statement into something with more edge in it. She said, "Not sure." She said it the way people repeat something when the repetition itself is meant to communicate disbelief. "You are not sure." Bruce said, "Size is a factor, it's not the only factor. In my experience, it's not even the primary factor." Yamada said, "Your experience." The same repetition, the same tone. "You make films. In films, small people defeat large people, because that is what the script says will happen. The script is written by someone sitting at a desk. The desk does not know anything about physics." The crowd made a sound, not hostile. The sound of 8,000 people who are watching something they didn't anticipate and are uncertain how to receive it. Bruce said, "I don't only make films." Yamada said, "You are known for films." Bruce said, "I'm a martial artist who also makes films. The order matters." Yamada said, "A martial artist who weighs 140 pounds, standing in front of me saying size doesn't matter." She looked at the crowd briefly, an appeal to the audience, sharing something she found self-evident. "You weigh 140 pounds. I weigh 750. You are saying that difference is not primary." Bruce said, "I'm saying it's not decisive." Yamada said something in Japanese to her coaches that the translator didn't catch, but that produced a brief exchange of looks among them. Then she turned back to Bruce, and she said, in English, the specific words that changed what the evening was going to be. She said, "Then prove it, right here. Let's see what matters more. Your theory or my physics?" The sumo hall produced the sound of 8,000 people understanding simultaneously what had just been proposed. The Federation chairman stepped forward immediately. He was saying several things in Japanese and English that were reasonable and professional and had no effect on the direction of events. 2 Federation officials were on their feet near the scorer's table. Bruce looked at Yamada. He looked at the trophy in his hands. He set it down at the edge of the competition area, carefully, upright. He said, "Your terms, like this video right now, not for any reason except that you are about to watch something that the people in this building spent the next 30 years describing to their grandchildren." Yamada said, "Sumo rules. I use sumo, you use what you have. You stay on your feet for 30 seconds, or you put me out of the ring or down on the mat, you win. You go down or out before 30 seconds. The physics were right." Bruce said, "Agreed." The Federation chairman was saying something with genuine urgency now. Yamada looked at him and said something brief in Japanese. He stopped. The championship referee, still present from the final, looked at the Federation chairman, who looked at 8,000 people who were not going anywhere, and made the decision that officials make when situations have moved past the point where their decisions are the most relevant thing happening. He told the referee to keep it clean and stop it if it needed stopping. The referee acknowledged this and moved to the competition area center and established terms. Both competitors acknowledged. The referee stepped back. They found their positions. Yamada settled into her sumo stance. The stance of 14 years, everything exactly where 14 years had put it. Her weight distributed with the specific stability of someone who has spent a decade and a half building an immovable base. She was the best in the world at what she was about to do, and 8,000 people who understood sumo knew precisely what that meant. Bruce stood the way he stood. The referee indicated they could begin. Yamada moved first. She came forward with the controlled speed of someone who understood that 750 pounds moving with purpose was its own argument, closing distance with the intention of establishing the contact that led to everything else. Bruce moved at an angle, not backward, sideways and slightly forward, the direction that 750 pounds of committed forward momentum did not expect, and Yamada's initial drive found the space where he had been rather than where he was. She recovered immediately. 14 years produced recovery that happened faster than thought. She turned and came again, adjusting the angle of approach, trying to close off the space he had used. Bruce moved inside this time, not away from her, toward her, getting into the space where her sumo techniques needed distance to function. From that inside position, his right palm found her hip, just the touch, brief and precise. The touch that communicated the specific thing it always communicated, which was that, from this position with this angle, Other options were available that hadn't been taken. Yamada stepped back, which was not something she did. The step back was involuntary, the automatic correction of a base that had been briefly disrupted, and the involuntary quality of it told her something she immediately tried not to fully process, because the fully processed version was uncomfortable. She came again with full commitment, everything she had, 750 pounds of dedicated forward force, aimed at establishing contact before whatever he was doing could happen again. Bruce moved inside the charge, got under the arms, found the position he had found before, and this time his right hand stayed a moment longer at her hip, and the guidance it applied to the momentum she had committed was small and precise. 750 pounds of momentum, redirected by a small amount, required a significant correction to prevent the floor from becoming the destination. Yamada's correction happened fast, but fast was not fast enough. Her knee touched the mat. The sumo hall made a sound that it had never made before in its history, not for any match, not for any championship, not for anything that had happened on this mat before this evening. 8,000 people producing simultaneously, the noise of people whose category system has been revised by direct experience. Yamada was on her feet in under 2 seconds. She came up with the speed and the controlled fury of someone for whom this was the first time in 64 matches that the mat had been involved in a way she hadn't chosen. She came at Bruce again immediately. He moved, and as she moved he was somewhere slightly different, and she moved again, and he was somewhere slightly different again, and the pattern had a quality to it that the people in the front rows, serious practitioners who understood what they were watching, began to see clearly, and that made the watching different from how it had been watching. He was not avoiding her. He was existing in a different relationship to her attacks than she had encountered before. The attacks were not finding him because the information he was providing about where he would be was consistently slightly wrong, not in a large, obvious way, but in the specific, precise way that made the difference between contact and nothing. She threw her best technique, the throw that had ended 64 matches, fully committed, full speed, full power, everything 14 years had built into a single explosive moment. Bruce moved inside it, and his hand found her lower back, and the guidance it added to her own forward commitment was small, and the consequence was not small. 750 pounds arrived at the mat with a sound that the back rows of the sumo hall heard clearly. 5 seconds total elapsed from the referee's signal. The sumo hall produced a sound that lasted for several seconds without changing in character, the sustained noise of 8,000 people trying to process something simultaneously. Yamada was on the mat for a moment, and then she was not on the mat. She was on her feet. She was moving toward Bruce with the specific expression of someone who has experienced something that does not fit their existing understanding of how things work, and who is not yet ready to accept that their understanding needs updating. She came and he moved, and she came again and he moved again, and each time the movement was different because he was reading what was coming before it arrived, and each time the consequence of her momentum was a problem for her, rather than for him. Her knee touched the mat twice more. The Federation officials had reached the competition area. The championship referee had his arms spread. Yamada's coaches were at her side. She stopped. Not because of any of these things. She stopped because something in her had received enough information to begin the specific difficult process of revision. She stood in the competition area with the officials around her and her coaches beside her and 8,000 people watching her, and her expression was doing several things at once that her face was not quite accustomed to doing. Bruce had started moving toward the area's edge. Yamada moved after him. Subscribe if you're still here. The next 60 seconds are the part of this story that nobody who was present has ever been able to describe the same way twice. Her coaches moved with her. The Federation officials moved. The championship referee moved. Everyone who was near enough to have any role in managing what happened next was moving toward Bruce and toward Yamada and the space between them. Yamada reached Bruce before any of them reached her. Her hand closed on his arm. Not an attack. The grip of someone who has something to say and is using the most direct method available to her to ensure the saying happens. He stopped. He turned and looked at her, her hand on his arm, the officials around them, the coaches nearby, 8,000 people watching. She said, "What did you do?" He said, "Which part?" She said, "My hip. When my knee went down the first time, your hand was at my hip." He said, "Your weight commits before your technique does. When you're loading the throw, your right hip comes forward first. By the time your technique is visible, your weight is already committed and can't come back." I was reading the hip. She absorbed this. She said, "And the touch redirected it." He said, "Your momentum redirected it." I just told it where to go. She said, "A small amount." He said, the amount it needed, not more. She was quiet. She said, I have fought 64 opponents. He said, I know. She said, nobody has found that. He said, nobody was looking at the hip before the technique. She said, they were watching the technique. He said, by then, the information is already older than you need it to be. She looked at him. 8,000 people were watching this exchange with the focused attention of a crowd that understands it is present for something that matters. The officials had stopped trying to intervene. The coaches had stopped talking. The chairman was holding his microphone at his side, watching. Yamada said, I said size always wins. He said yes. She said, on this mat, in front of everyone. He said, yes. She said, I was wrong about that. She said it directly and simply, the way she said everything, without decoration and without performance, not managing how it sounded, just saying what was true. She looked at the 8,000 people who had watched the last 5 minutes happen. She picked up the microphone from the championship referee, who had been holding it since the ceremony was interrupted. She said, in Japanese first, and then in English, I said something at the beginning of this ceremony that I believed when I said it. I said size always wins. I have believed that for 14 years, because for 14 years my experience confirmed it. She paused. Tonight my experience changed. The man I said that to showed me something on this mat that my 14 years had not shown me. I was wrong. I am saying that in front of everyone here because I said the wrong thing in front of everyone here. 8,000 people responded. The response built from the front rows backward, the specific warm sound that crowds produce when they watch something difficult done honestly in public. Bruce picked up the championship trophy from the edge of the competition area where he had set it. He walked to Yamada and held it out to her. She took it. She held it and looked at it for a moment and then looked at Bruce and she said, in English, the hip, before the technique, can it be corrected? He said, reduced. Not easily and not quickly. It's built into how you initiate everything. The correction has to start at the weight transfer that loads the hip, not at the hip itself. She said, how long? He said, months at minimum, before any real change. Longer before it becomes reliable. She said, I'll do the months. He said, I know, people who built what you built generally will. She said, come to my training hall tomorrow morning. He said, what time? She said, 6. He said, I'll be there. She bowed. The full formal bow of a serious practitioner, complete and given entirely. He returned it. Same depth, same duration. The sumo hall responded with the sustained warm sound of 8,000 people watching something resolve honestly, and the sound was the warmest of the evening, warmer than the championship final, warmer than everything that preceded it. The Federation chairman stepped forward and said the closing words that the ceremony required. The photographs were taken. The evening concluded in the way championship evenings conclude, with the crowd filtering toward the exits, and the officials managing the logistics of closing, and the champion standing in the center of the competition area with her trophy and whatever she was thinking about that nobody else could see. Backstage, in the corridor outside the competition area, Bruce was collecting his jacket when Yamada found him. Still in her competition clothes, she said, the weight transfer before the hip. Show me exactly where in the sequence it starts. He spent 20 minutes showing her. Specifically and completely, the same way he explained things to students who asked real questions, walking her through the sequence from the earliest readable signal forward, showing her where the commitment happened before she was conscious of committing. She asked 4 specific questions. He answered all 4. She said, I'll see you at 6. He was there at 6. She was already on the mat. They worked for 3 hours. Not a lesson where one person taught and one person learned, but the specific productive exchange that happens when 2 serious practitioners who have come from completely different directions find where their vocabularies overlap and spend time at that overlap working out what it contains. She showed him things about generating force from a lower base than he typically worked from. He showed her things about reading initiation. Both of them left the 3 hours with something they hadn't had when they arrived. That is what the evening actually was. The 5 seconds on the mat were the beginning of it. The 3 hours the next morning were the rest of it. The 5 seconds are what gets told, because 5 seconds makes a story. The 3 hours are what mattered, because 3 hours is where the actual exchange happened. Subscribe if this was worth your time. Tell me in the comments what you think Yamada's first words were when she got back to her training hall the next day. I read every one.